Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact. Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Huntley. At this podcast, we explore leadership, renewal, and what it takes to build missional parishes and dioceses. Today, I'm joined with my very special friend, Father Declan McNicholas, someone that I've had the privilege of working with for years in our coaching relationship with St. John the Evangelist Parish in St. John, Indiana. Father Declan has taken the principles that he's learned and applying them at a diocesan level so that he can bless his team and his team can bless parishes. Today's conversation, we're going to explore how that transition has gone and what he has learned as a leader. But before we dive in, I want to remind you that our parish evangelization course for leaders is a powerful program designed to help evangelization leaders develop the skills and strategies to build invitational, mission-driven parishes. So if you're looking for ways to reach the unchurched and dechurched, then this course is for you. You can find out more details in the show notes below or by going to huntleyleadership.com. Let's get into it. Father Declan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ron. Thanks. It's good to see you again.
It's always fun when we get together. I'm wondering if you could share with our listeners how you got here. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So as you were saying, right, I'm the director of missionary discipleship evangelization now for the Diocese of Gary. And as a little baby priest, I don't think this was what I thought I was going to be doing, right? I don't think so. I'm 5.5 years ordained, coming up on 6 years ordained, which is crazy. But to think like this is where I end up or where I'm at right now is just like the furthest thing from what I expected when I got ordained 5.5 years ago. So yeah, as I said, now I work part-time at the diocese. I'm still at St. John the Evangelist as a part-time associate. I'm there pretty much on the weekends and then, one day during the week, and I help out in the evenings when I can. But yeah, the journey definitely is an interesting one. So I got ordained right before COVID. I love this. This is kind of like a fun little thing. Remember, so last semester of seminary, they actually teach you how to say mass as a priest, right? Like this is something you have to do. And the professor is this priest. And for the final, we had to do mass to the video camera and record ourselves and then be judged on it. And you remember him saying, "Gentlemen, this is the last time you're ever going to say mass to a video camera." And then I'm standing at the altar in a church that seats 1,200 people by myself to a video camera 9 months later, right? Because of COVID. So it's just fascinating. But it really was a blessing because when that happened, I went to the bishop who had just became the bishop of the Diocese of Gary. And I asked if I could go back to school to get a master's in ecclesial nonprofit administration. So like an MBA, but for churches.
Yeah.
And he agreed. He let me do it. So it was pretty much completely online, but COVID was this great opportunity for me to go back to school and to do that master's program. And then after a couple of years being at that parish, I then moved to St. John the Evangelist, and that's when I met you, Ron. I remember our first meeting on Zoom, and then many times in person since then, really building my own leadership. At St. John, the pastor, Father Sammy Miletta, giving me opportunities to lead teams, to build teams that were at the parish, like the worship team, that we just didn't necessarily have these teams in place. And really, through failures, learning how to lead better and continue to fail. But I think it's in my failures that I learn a lot of lessons. And now I'm at the diocese. I have a team of, I think it's 9 people that I lead here, all outward focusing, helping parishes and specifically our leaders in parishes to learn what it means to evangelize, to help them to acquire those skills to go out and reach the unchurched and dechurched, to bring them back and to encounter Jesus. So that's in a nutshell.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. It was fun. I do remember meeting you for the first time. They were so excited about you, Father Sammy and the team. And then I got to meet you and I thought, okay, I know why they're excited because I'm excited now too. And then all the time we worked together, I was always really impressed in terms of your ability to learn and apply principles and take risks. And some of those risks pay off and some of those risks result in, oh, crud, this didn't go so well. That's to your point. You just said, that's how we learn, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I remember, I don't know, this was like one of my favorite times when you come and visit us at St. John is, I think we call them our bourbon nights, where at least one night in the trip when you're there is after all the craziness of the day is over, I go and get a decent bottle or a good bottle of bourbon, and we sit down and we have a conversation. And I know you've helped me because I need to process stuff out loud, and you point out things that I miss and in my leadership, and just like, well, think about this, or what about this? And
Mm.
yeah, it helps me learn. It helps me process all that. So I
Yeah,
always appreciate it.
me too. It makes me feel like I should have a glass of bourbon while we're doing this podcast.
I wish I could pull up in my drawer right here and just pull out one, but I think HR at the diocese would really frown upon that one.
That's fair. My cabinet actually has bourbon in it, and it's 100% because of you. Every time I have a glass of bourbon, I think of you. So there you go. You're international. You're in Canada now, and
My influence is extended past the borders of America.
it sure has. It sure has. What are some of those? Like again, and I was really excited to have this podcast because it's wild to me, and kudos to Bishop McClory for inviting you to take on the task he has, because it's not a small task, and oftentimes in dioceses, bishops don't do that. Like, they give it to the people who've been there a long time, and it's almost like, okay, it's your turn, and you haven't been ordained long enough for it to be your turn, but you have skills and gifts that you'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to see. And so he's took a risk on you. So first of all, I just want to say, Bishop McClory, like, way to go. Like, that in itself is amazing. But then when you got into this role, my guess is, like, because I work with dioceses, and they're not all healthy, believe it or not, internally. And sometimes things need to shift if we're going to be more fruitful, and that's normal and okay. And I just wonder, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you learned as an associate with Father Samuel Maletta that you brought with you into this role? So what are some of the things that you were able to transfer over that, yeah.
No, I love that. Well, first, actually, like, giving kudos to Bishop McClory, like our vicar general here in the Diocese of Gary, which, for those who don't know, diocesan structures, is the second in command. Essentially, if you want to use it that way, is Father Chris Stanish, and he's, I think, 37 now. I think I think he is the youngest vicar general in our country, and he came in 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Bishop McClory brought him in again because Father Chris has these skills and just these gifts to be able
Mm,
to lead, and it's really because of him even the job here exists, because this job didn't exist before Bishop asked me to take it on. So I
right.
think there's first of all, at St. John the Evangelist, I stepped into a place that is dynamic, and there's always this
Oof.
desire to change and to get better. So as church, universal, I think we fall into the trap time and time again, and it comes up in different language, but this is how we've always done it, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
there's that language, and you can translate it 100 different ways of how people say it, and that is not in the vocab of Father Samuel Maletta, which over the 2.5 years I was there full time, it translated like, let's break something and see if we can like resurrect it like the phoenix into something better, right? Like, there's a sense of like, yeah, it's going pretty well, but like, let's blow it up because it could be better. And I think that's really helped me come into a place at the diocese where, yeah, it's a structure that's in place, but really stepping into a new role and building a new cold understanding of what we're doing here, to help bring the team together. So not a matter of just destroying it for destroying its sake, but really say
No.
like, okay, how can we think differently about how we're doing catechesis and faith formation? How can we think differently about doing youth and adults, or doing intercultural ministry? And like, I just had a whole day retreat with my team, our yearly planning day that I did, and setting goals and everything else, because I love that stuff.
Yes,
Just
you
makes me
do.
so excited. We then set rocks for our quarterly rocks that we'll review come April 1st, and all these things, right? Like, you have to do this, because otherwise you just fall into the mindset of, well, this is what we did last year, which is terrible. Like, what
Mhm.
are we supposed to do? What is God calling us to today? And one of the big things that just like the Lord put on my heart as I was preparing myself as a leader for this meeting was, you know what, I want, and I think this comes directly, so this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but directly
Yeah.
from Father Sammy Maletta, and just that vision of, you know what, I want us to do, like, I want us to get creative and to think outside the box in
Mm.
all the things that we do in every aspect. Like, and so I went, like, as we were talking as a team, I was like, I want us to fail sometimes. Like,
Right.
I hate failing. Like, and 3 years ago or 4 years ago when Father Sammy said, like, I want you to fail, like, like that scares me. But then like now I'm saying that. So I think that's like very concrete things as a leader that I am internalizing myself, like, yeah, let's try something new, because if we don't try something new, I know where the trajectory is. Like the
Mm,
data points out the trajectory if we don't try something different.
right. And that's neat because there's a couple things I want to comment on. And those of you that follow the podcast, you've seen Father Sammy on this podcast before, and in fact, you've probably seen Declan before, Father Declan. And so, um, Father Sammy is he's a prophet in terms of his apest charisms, like so that's up there. And prophets, they challenge the status quo. And so what you were saying early on is Father Sammy, just never, he'll break something to make it better. He's not afraid to push the bar on something to make it better. And that's part of the charism of being prophetic, which is really cool. And then you said you loved setting targets and goals and breaking things down because you're very driven and you love the discipline and the process of doing what it takes to be great, which I think is what your APES profile. Do you remember?
Yeah. So our evangel or not evangelist,
Apostolic,
apostle, prophet,
apostle.
evangelist are the
Yeah,
top
there
three.
you go.
Yeah.
Oh, so that
Yeah.
that prophet in you comes alive too,
Yeah. So
right?
it's not my first one like Father Sammy. I think I counteract him with being then
Yeah,
an apostle first,
yeah.
which, as I mean we've talked about, is like, man, like I love seeing the structure and being able to build
Yes.
upon that. Like, how are we going forward?
Yeah, what's the DNA that we need to be able to multiply? And apostles get that piece. And so that's a really neat combination for you. And that's why for those of you that are listening, if you haven't done the APEST vocational assessment, do it and get
Hmm.
really in touch with how you're hardwired so that you can collaborate and cooperate with how the Spirit has made you. So that's so cool. So Father Sammy, really, it sounds like through your time there, really challenged you to push yourself to the point where you might even make mistakes for the sake of growth and learning.
Yeah, it's almost, I think, like repositioning what the goal is, right? I think sometimes as priests in seminary, as leaders in general, the
Yes.
greatest good is safety. Like, I
Right.
want to be safe in the organization. I want to make sure I have all my, T's crossed, I's dotted, whatever. Like, and that
Yep.
manifests itself in many different ways. But as we know, like a great leader can't do that, because that's always going to hold him or her back and to say like,
Mhm.
okay, what's pushing to the next thing? Like, how are we actually doing something different?
Amen. Yeah, I think if we're doing something safe, we're probably not following the vision that Christ is placing on our
Mm.
hearts because it requires faith. And faith is stepping into the unknown with confidence in the Creator. And so if you know, then you don't need faith. Just
That's
do
a
what you've
good way.
always.
Yeah. Like, what's the point? Like, we're stepping into it in faith. Well, that means we have to be past ourselves. I
Yeah.
love I love this. Sorry, I don't know, this is
No,
off
please.
topic,
No,
but
no,
kind of
no.
on
It's
topic. Like, I
please.
love thinking about, like, I really think that faith is, so God doesn't ask us to do what we can do. He asks us to do what we can't do, because the difference between what I can do and what's being asked of me, that's where faith steps in. That's where the power of God comes in. And like in leadership, that's so true. Like, I can't do what I'm being asked of right now by myself. Like, and I guess like when I'm at my best, I rely on the power of the Holy Spirit and that faith, and that's the
Amen.
difference. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. And even stepping into that role, stepping into the role that you're in now, that must have came with a lot of pressure. Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think the benefit, like, so one of the great things is like, well, there's so many great things, right? But
Sure.
I think about just in like relationship with the parish is being established at the parish already. So I'm able to enter back in. Like yesterday, I was at the parish all day for my day at the parish, and just being able to enter into different conversations because I know the DNA of the parish and what we're doing because I've been there. So like that part, like that safety experience, and also like to feel supported, like being loved by the people and all that stuff
Yeah.
helps me then. I think on the other side of things, the diocesan side, where it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I remember the first time walking into this, the diocesan chancery, like, what is like this? It just is a foreign place.
Right.
um and so like actually like Father Sammy Miletta, he was our vicar general years ago, and so
Mhm.
kind of having him like to be that sounding board sometimes to hear like, okay, what does it mean to work at the diocese? Both hearing the good and the bad, like how the sausage
Sure.
is made and his perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely the challenges, and then just like, knowing people, ancillary in my ministry that work at the diocese, and now like, oh, I work closely with them, and just like all these different things that come from that. But
Mhm.
it's a challenge. I think what I talk to my team about is because our job is to help the parishes in the different ministerial ways to do ministry. So our
Mhm.
job our job as the Office of Missionary Discipleship, all the people that work with me, our job isn't to do the ministry. Our job is to help people become leaders to do the ministry in the parishes,
Mhm.
which is that much harder. Like everybody on
Right.
my team are great. Like there's a reason why they're in these roles and they know their stuff and they're all this stuff, but that next level of teaching that and leading people and helping
Yeah.
walk with people, and I think and for me too, that's a challenge. Like with my brother priest, like, yeah, I love talking evangelization. I love doing it. I love Alpha for that reason, like getting my hands dirty and like doing the
Mm.
small groups and having those conversations. And like that is so rewarding and so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's great when I can do it. But oftentimes now I'm called to help my brother priest learn what does it mean to be an evangelist, to be a missionary disciple. And you know
Yeah.
what? That's foreign language for a lot of us.
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fair enough. And it's a very different skill set, isn't it? I remember talking to one diocese, and we were just talking about the different roles people play. And this one person ran this young adult ministry as part of their role in the diocese. And I said, why? Well, because that's their role. And I think, no, it's not. Their role is to support churches so those things happen, not to do it around the churches because they can't get them to do it. And it's a different mindset. It's like, oh, you mean I'm not supposed to do it? No. And so when you came into the diocese, you mentioned your role didn't exist. And so I can't help but think maybe you've brought some vision and maybe a different way of working there. Like, what, how were they functioning before? And then how are you functioning now? And how did you bring that about?
Yeah. No, well, before, like we had these different offices, right? So we had catechesis, we had faith formation, we had youth and young adults, we had intercultural ministry, and they all work together. I mean, like you would in an office space, but like, okay, we had a men's conference that was done by this person, or we had these things going on, and it was very isolated, siloed. I mean, in one sense or
Yeah.
another. So I think just bringing us all together and saying, no, we're going to do this as a team. We're going to meet regularly. We're going to have these experiences where we're going to do ministry. We're going to do life together because this is how we
Mm.
function. Like we are a team. So I think that's like one of the big things that I mean, that's my role, is to bring the team
Wow.
together and to have a common vision along of Bishop McClory's of missionary
Mhm.
discipleship and leading us in that direction. And the second is, I think, really shifting that mindset. Like you said, it is hard. It's easy to do ministry. I mean, easy, if however you want to use it. It's a lot harder to help inspire and teach and lead and the other people to do the ministry. And so that's my mantra with my team. I
Mm.
have each of the team members, they have to have uh, I forget what we term it, but like essentially a team around them of their
Yeah.
leaders. So like
Me.
our youth and adult person, she has two different teams. She has a group of young adult leaders for parishes, so parish young adult leaders, and then she has a youth council, youth young adult or youth leaders,
Mm.
because she needs to speak into them, and they need to
Yeah.
speak into her to like keep her connected to reality of like what's going on, and
Yeah.
like her role is what's the best and the greatest things in youth ministry, and help lead them and help give them ideas and like give them a space and to help them grow in there, because most of them are volunteers, they don't have time, or they're just dying because ministry is hard. So our job is to support
Jesus,
them
yeah.
in that. And so
Yeah.
that's like a very concrete way that some of them are doing it, but not everybody on building leaders in parishes. So our
Were
number
they
one
doing that
goal,
previously?
some of them were, not all of them.
Okay. And now,
And
it's like, this is how we want to function.
like this is no, they, yeah, like this is expectations. This is our number one priority, is building
Wow.
leaders in parishes. Our second is then doing ministry at the diocesan level that just
Mhm.
has to happen, right? Like last year
Sure.
we had a Eucharistic Congress, so we had a whole summer of events and things that were going on that we support the bishop, and so ministries that he was wanting to do. That's part of our role as well. So trying to balance all that's a challenge, but a good challenge.
Well, I have to say, I got to take in some of that with you guys because of your
Yes.
good work, and got on a bus and went there with a bunch of you from the diocese, and it was absolutely wonderful. So,
Yeah.
my wife and I were certainly enriched by your ministry and your team. That's so cool. So, coming into talk to me this a little bit, because when you came on at St. John the Evangelist, you know people were excited for you, but you still had to build relationships and build trust. And
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, when you go back there on the weekends, it's just so nice to go back because you're well loved and people know you, and you're a part of building what they're experiencing right now. And so it's a safe place to land, even though they're driving forward on missionary discipleship and always growing and pushing the envelope. That's still
Yeah.
a place, a culture where you feel very, very at home. But I can only imagine coming into the diocese and getting a brand new team that probably had to start all over again in one sense. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh yeah. No, I think that is the case, and I think I still am. I'm a year and a
Mm,
half, well, not quite even a year and a half into working with this team, and the challenges we had right when I got here. Somebody, not the right person in the right seat on the bus. We had to make sure we had
mm,
everybody in our right places. All the things that come with that. Um, I think for myself, what's built trust is consistency, which it's
mm,
interesting. We've talked about with strength finders leaning into your strengths. And for
yes.
me, discipline is my number one.
Hmm.
I love so consistency in my life is, and so I leaned into it. We have we as a team every Monday morning we do a half hour of prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, and then we go into a 90-minute meeting every Monday, and we have a whole system of accountability, of highlights from what happened this past week, issues that we need to talk about, a process of how we talk about issues to come to solutions, to
Hmm.
assign tasks to people. But I think having that consistency, say this is how we're doing it, and we're going to continue to do it. I think it took some time to get people on board, but now there's a comfort in everybody because you can show up knowing what to expect. And
Yes.
so when I'm at my best, again, I fail at it time and time again. I think my ability to show up and have consistency in how I show up as a leader to my
Mm,
team, and to say we're not this is where we're going, and to have their back in that. I'm hoping, and I hope that's what's building the trust, and to continue to do that. I think to have a
that's
clear vision. I think
hmm
I'm able to speak a vision of Bishop McClory to say this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and to be able to be that conduit to know we're going in this direction really helps too. Obviously, things change and you have to adjust as you go along, but I think those are probably the main two ways.
That's cool. It's funny. You mentioned this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. And I just want to break that open a little bit, because it's usually the where and the why that are
Mm,
the vision pieces. Hey, we're going here,
yeah,
and this is why it's so important. So then this is the what and the how. So the what and the how are in the context of the where and the why, right? So
yeah,
yeah, just something to always keep in mind is the where is the fruit of our labor.
yeah.
Well,
This is why we do all the work that we've done because it's hard work.
yeah, and absolutely. We want to be a diocese where there's unanimity of vision, where we're parishes more. We have more fruitful parishes here than any other diocese
Yeah,
around us, so that people are coming to know Jesus. They're on mission, and that their lives are meaningful and purposeful, and they're rooted in their Catholic faith and inviting more people. And the reason we want to have that is because life stinks right now. People are lonely. They're distracted by their devices. Suicide rates are high, depression is through the roof, relationships are tanking. And so that's why it's so important for us to get here. To that end, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. It's like,
yeah.
oh, yeah. So I love that you do that. Um, I also want to break down what you said about consistency, because you said two things, and I just don't want it to be lost. You said consistency. We do the same thing every week,
Mm,
and we know the structure of the meeting and how to show up, and that provides psychological safety. To your point, people know how to show up to the meeting. They know where they're going to inject. They know how they can inject to make the most of it and get the most out of it. and
yeah,
and I think Patrick Lencioni in his book Death by Meeting said one of the worst things we can do to people is have meeting soup. And so, yeah, we have a time, but what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and everything else changes every time. So it freaks people out. But you're providing the psychological safety of consistency. But the other part you talked about, Father Declan, is how you show up, the energy you bring, and whatever that looks like, and that too can help build trust with teams. And so, again, I just want to highlight what you're saying, so it's not lost on our listeners, because it's so important, and
Yeah.
you are intentional about doing it. Not that we can't mess it up, but
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to how you've coached me over these last 3+ years of the consistent, of how we show up and to make sure that we show up with that consistency, because it helps people know to have that safety to, like, yeah. And when I'm not the one running the meeting, and it's not a good, well-run meeting, it's like, well, when can I have problems that I want to talk about. Well, am I allowed to bring it up? Should I bring it up? And then I don't feel heard and I don't feel valued. And so I don't want that to do it to my people. I want them to know, like, okay, you have issues, like, this is when we bring it up. This is how you could do it. And we're going to talk about it. Maybe
right.
not this week because we ran out of time, but we will talk about it. It's
Yeah.
captured. It's going to be talked about. So that way they at least hopefully know that how to show up and how they can bring forward things, because that's the most important thing, I feel like.
Oh, that's so cool, because, the 5 pillars of trust that Dr. Henry Cloud talks about in his book, Trust, first one is care. And how do we show
Yeah.
care? We listen. And that's what I'm hearing from you. No, there's going to be a place where you guys get to talk, and we're going to capture it, and we're going to get to it. I feel heard. I feel cared for. First pillar of trust.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
it just triggered. I can't remember who said it. I heard it actually at the Alpha conference, but it says that the
Yes.
connection between feeling loved and being heard is so close that most people don't know the difference. So if you just
Right?
listen, people are going to feel loved. And so, like, usually we don't use those words in an organization, but we should love our people. Like, Christ calls us to love our
Amen.
enemies. So, like, if you're not loving your team, then you need to figure out how to do that, because that is, like, that's the gospel message, is you have to love. So
Amen.
I think that's one of the ways.
Talk to me a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about what Father Sammy said to you and what creates the environment one way or the other when he said, I want you to be able to fail, because failing is vulnerable. And so, what creates a culture where we're safe to fail?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind as I'm thinking
Hmm.
about that, like in my experiences at the parish, is he gave me space to fail. Like, you can't fail if you're never given a long enough leash. Like, so
Hmm.
I think the example that comes to my mind is 6 months in, 8 months in, taking over the worship side of the parish, which
Hmm.
was kind of, disarray. There wasn't a team together. So we had, liturgists, music, sacristan, servers, deacons, priests, right? So we had all these things happening and we were
A lot of
doing good
functions.
liturgy.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
functions. Yeah,
functions, yeah, but, like, we never came to, like, there needed to be somebody to bring us together, so giving me and, posing it to him, like, "Hey, I wanna try this," like, I think that was, like, and then failed at different moments, but I'm proud of it. Like, now we have a worship team, I'm no longer, leading it, but that I put together a team that's still
yeah,
functioning and still moving forward, and it looks different than it did 3 years ago, but I think that's, for me, a concrete example of he had to trust me enough as a leader to say, like,
yeah.
okay, like, here you go, here's a long enough leash to really, exercise some leadership. And then for me, it's like, well, when I do fail, like, don't come after me and do a personal attack, because
Right.
that'll shut me down, right? Like, we can talk about issues, we can talk about, like, what I did or didn't do, or how I could have done something different, but you
Mm,
need to listen to me, hear my point of view, and then, like,
right.
let's talk it out. But as soon as it becomes something of, you should, like, that finger pointing, then it's just
Right.
like, I'm done. I'm out. Like, why would I do this again? I don't want to
Right.
go back to that psychological safety. And so I think as a leader, as I'm telling my people, I want you to be creative and fail. Now
Right.
I need to have the fortitude within myself, like, when they do, because that means they've done something great to celebrate that. Okay, you
Yeah.
tried something different,
Right.
and that they need to be, like, it's all part of, like, you're a part of the team. So we all failed together, but we also all win together. So I don't know.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's kind of where I'm at with all that.
I like that. I know what I'm hearing in that too. There's the leash part, to give people an opportunity, to give them a chance, and to trust them,
Yeah.
and to to entrust them, to empower them to do that, which I love. And Father Sammy's great at that. But then the other piece is everybody receives feedback differently. And so that means you're going to have to understand the people that you're working with so that you give it to them in a way that works for them. Because we'll
Mhm.
often treat others like we'd expect to be treated, but that's not always helpful. And so it's dangerous to assume that the person is going to receive feedback or want feedback the same way you do. And that often can lead to hurt,
Hmm. Yeah, I
right?
think
Mm,
because we treat people. I
yeah,
The question that I guess I have in my mind oftentimes when I'm in a
yeah,
meeting with somebody, especially hard meetings. Actually, had
yeah,
one this morning with one of my people. Like, challenging meeting
yeah.
is what the question in my mind is. What is it like to be on this other side of me right now? Like, what
Ooh,
is it like to hear me speak to, like, if I was in their
yeah,
shoes, like putting myself in their shoes. But what I like about what you said is actually pushes me not just what is it like to be on the other side of me, because that's still a
mhm,
self-referential, like,
right,
well, what do I want? Well, what is it like to be that person and what I know about them?
yeah.
And I think it goes back to what we've talked about, previously, Ron, is different times of, like, if we're going to lead somebody, we need to know them. We need to know their APES. We need to know their strengths. Those tools help us know them as an individual, because you're right. How, Father Sammy wants to hear feedback is going to be very different than how I want to, right?
Yeah.
Since we've used his name before, or different. And as a
Yes. Yeah.
leader, it's up to me to give the correct form of feedback or the correct
Yes.
vehicle of feedback. Feedback needs to be given, but I am the one that has to take ownership. I'm the leader.
That's right.
And so I have to create that space for them and however that person needs it, because it's not fair to put it on them. That's not
No,
their role. It's a power differential.
it sure is. And the truth is we all have our default way. And so
Yeah.
what ends up happening is when we're in a place of authority, we often inflict ourselves on everybody around us with good intent
Mhm.
instead of taking the other approach that no, there's a power imbalance and it's my responsibility to understand how each of them prefer feedback. And then I have to change. I have to change my way based on who I'm dealing with. When we take the time to do that, we get far better results than everybody else have to adapting to us, inflicting ourselves on everybody. But it takes a special kind of character in a leader to do that, to want to, because that takes more time.
Yeah. That's the hard part of being a leader, right? Like, that's where the challenge comes in. It's
Hmm.
easy to be the boss, the person in
Yeah,
charge. It's way
that's right.
different than being like, yeah, I pay you, therefore you're going to do this. Like,
That's
no,
right.
like, and that's how so many people lead.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
true. I had a funny story I want to share with you. I worked with a pastor one time, and you know, we used, he led sometime. He gave feedback like a seagull. He'd just swoop in, crap on people, and keep going. And
I
and
love that image.
right, and so it was true. And he could just suck the life out of people with a look sometimes. But what was neat about that pastor is that he could receive feedback in real time and it didn't bother him at all. He had really thick skin. And so, like, I remember even at one point we worked together because he was on a podcast and I was saying, well, okay, if you're on that podcast, don't say this, 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 and this. Because when you do that, people get this, 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 and this, and you can't do that. And he's like, well, why don't you come into the room with me and let's whiteboard it and then stay in the room with me while I'm in the podcast. And honest to goodness, we whiteboarded the daylights out of this great big whiteboard in terms of ideas and thoughts. And so he's literally in the middle of the conversation on a podcast, and I'm pointing to the next thing that we've already talked about. And it was so well. Nobody can take feedback like that, but he could. So that's how he gave feedback. And it was
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it worked for him. That does not work for anybody else I've ever met. But he had that capacity to take feedback in real time and apply it instantly. And he was so good at it. I enjoyed working with him for that reason, is because we had a high degree of trust. And it's like, we're going to this meeting. Here's what I need you to say. Here's why, because here's the impact you're going to have. You'd be like, sure. And he'd go in and he'd execute it. And it's like very few people can do that,
Yeah, that
And so,
what I love about that though is it shows the dynamic of why we need a team, because I have
yes.
blind spots, I have things that I'm not good at, and you have things that you're not good at and that you are really good at, and the goal is as a team we come together, and if we have trust, like you said, we
Yeah.
can have those conversations. We can become great because we bring all our strengths and weaknesses together, and we can minimize our weaknesses and blind spots and maximize our strengths.
Amen. Amen. And that's the second pillar of trust is motive. And so if you have my back and I have your back and you're telling me something, even if I don't want to hear it, I trust your motive because I trust you. And so it's so true. And it makes life far more fun. Let me ask you, I know our work together at St. John the Evangelist, we have a leadership team meetings, one-on-one meetings. People in the structure have meetings with their teams to support them and bless the daylights out of them. So anybody that's been coached by me or listened to what I do, there's always this organizational structure where we're blessing the daylights out of the people we support. How does that look for you at a diocesan level? It sounds like you're doing it with the people that you support, which makes my day. How do you experience that with Father Chris and Bishop McClory? Like, do you guys have any meetings, or what's that look like for you guys?
Yeah. And so it's actually really exciting because Bishop McClory he has a leadership team. So I sit on his leadership team.
Okay.
It's all the department heads, actually. So, like the CFO, the head of human resources, myself, Father Chris as vicar general,
Right.
head of Catholic schools or superintendent for schools, and then head of communication. So we all come together once a week on Tuesdays, have a leadership team meeting. And
Yep.
then from there, so similarly, I have the largest team at the diocese, so I have that weekly meeting, but they are then meeting with their people. So I guess structurally that's where it is like, so we come together as a leadership team, feeling that support from Bishop and from Father Chris. And then I'm here to support my team. So yeah, and then my structure is, like I said, I have that weekly Monday meeting, and then I do monthly one-on-ones. So I have everybody scheduled once a month. I just had 2 of them today, this morning, so that way we can make sure that because all the ministry we're doing is so unique. I mean, the person who's doing marriage and family life
Yeah.
doesn't care about all the details of youthing adults, maybe, right? Like, and so I need to make sure I give space so that way they have things that need to come up that don't affect the whole team, but that we need
Mhm.
to talk through, and I need to support them in those ways. So those monthly one-on-ones, and then of course the as needed, the water cooler meetings, whatever you want to call them, which I think
Yeah.
are moments for us to really work well together. So that's kind of how that structure works. And then me and Father Chris, we're very close. We're friends. We actually were on vacation together about 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
our cadence isn't necessarily a sit down once a week or once a month, but we have a lot of time where we're together for different things. And so
Yeah.
what I've done is I use those times like, okay, this is what's coming up. Let's talk about it, and to make sure to
Right.
create space for that conversation to take place. So
Isn't
it's
it fun?
structured very
Yeah.
similar to the parish. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, that's so beautiful. I just think, isn't it fun when you're doing ministry with friends? Right?
Yeah.
People that you really care about. And so even when it's, brandy time or hangout time or dinner time, it's like, no, we're together. Let's talk about this stuff because you're just so passionate about it. It is your vocation. It's like, this is, you're so good at it. You really are. And it's so fun to watch you enjoy your priesthood and the different opportunities for impact that you have. I get great joy out of you and the people who love you and appreciate you. It's just really fun. And with Father Chris, we're going to get him on the podcast at some point too. But again, your guys together is a wonderful move by Bishop McClory from what I can tell. And
Somebody said we're like Peter and John in the apostles, that we get to work together. We're friends. There
yeah,
is definitely like we're gonna have a competition. Like we are driven, right? Like I want to be better than you, and like
yeah,
like brotherly
right,
way. Like there's this
yeah.
brotherhood about it. And yeah, I can't remember who said, yeah, but it was just like, yeah, I was like, oh, that's a great great comparison.
Yeah, that really is. That's going to stick with me. As you look forward in terms of where you're at as a diocese, what do you see as your biggest challenges and opportunities?
Yeah. No, so as a diocese, I think that's really good. Because what are the challenges that are coming up? There's so many, right? I think one of the
Of
big things
course.
that we are looking at here in the Diocese of Gary is a pastoral planning that's coming up in this year throughout the whole diocese. So we've done pockets of it, and the question really comes down to both priest as well as people, right? Like, so we
Mhm.
can't have parishes with only 30 people coming to mass on Sunday. How are we supposed to be missional? How are we supposed to be evangelical if this is we're just trying to keep the lights on? So like
Yeah.
really like what does that look like moving into the future, which is then an opportunity. And I think that's really where my team comes in, because anyways,
Yeah.
we pull people together and communities together. okay, how are we going to reimagine what it looks like to do these things on the whole diocesan level? So I think that's really what's coming up here in the diocese. Just like with Catholic education, we're doing so many amazing things. Our Catholic schools are full, and it's just really exciting here in Northwest Indiana to have that. Like actually looking at opening new schools and the possibility of that, and it's
Yeah.
just this ripe territory for future disciples and to make disciples and to help our schools become that place, right?
Mhm.
So I guess those are some immediate ones that come to mind.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. When it comes to some of the, I just want to get people to connect with some of the things you've done because I know some of the things you've done, but grounded in faith and stuff. How would people connect more with you if they wanted to say, "Hey, you know what, this guy sounds interesting. I wonder if there's any more I can get of this guy." Where would they go?
Well, if you go to Instagram and just look up Fr Declan McNicholas. So Instagram would be my number one, as well as Facebook. Just look up my name, Declan McNicholas, Father Declan McNicholas, as well as SJE Plus, and all my stuff for my podcast and things like that are on there. So yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be a great place to find some of that stuff. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that your homilies are taped and then put out. And so if you're following Father Declan, you'll get to hear how he communicates too, and you'll get to hear his passion, which is fun. So, Father Declan, maybe as we wrap up, I wonder, as a closing thought to leaders in terms of, you guys are clergy leaders, and not all
Mhm.
clergy are leaders, but you can choose to become a clergy leader. And again, I find you have this appetite for growth and learning and bigger impact. And if somebody's like, "Yeah, but should I, shouldn't I?" Like, what would you say to that person in terms of how they live out their vocation as a priest, sorry, and the role that committing to growing as a leader could be?
Yeah. I love that because there is like as priests, I think we get taught how to be a priest,
Hmm.
and it's great, right? Like, okay, but if you're going to do that in leadership, then you become a dictator very quickly, right? And so as a
Yes.
leader, we have that ability, like Jesus does, to multiply. He look at what he did in 3 years, and it's because he poured himself into Peter, James, and John, and into the 12. I mean that model that takes place. And so I think just for us priests, like do you want a dynamic parish? Do you want a place that's thriving, that's on fire? Like if you work in a parish, if you're a pastor, like this is like it's so exciting to be a part of something where we have so many people that are on fire that it's like, oh my gosh, okay, we have to try to find something to plug them in because we have so many leaders that want to do and take over like ministries and to be a part of it is like it's exhausting because they're so on fire. So I think that's
Yeah.
what leadership does, and that's what Father Sammy has been able to do over the course of 25 years of the parish is to build this culture, and that's the
Mhm.
desire of my heart is to like, how do I impact this into somebody else? And so as a priest,
Mhm.
I'm multiplying the ministry and the beauty that God has given to me in this role, and
Mhm.
so it's not, yeah, I guess don't fall back on, well, I'm a priest and you're going to do what Father says. That's a
Right.
lame excuse for being a dictator. Anyway,
Be a leader, not a dictator.
yeah, something like that.
I love it. No, it's so important and it is fun. Have they renamed the conference yet? Do you know?
Yeah,
They
so check
tell
out
me.
this coming year, Disciple Up is the new name of our conference at SJE Plus, Disciple Up. Thank you. Yeah, so it's going to be great. Ron has been our keynote speaker, I think, last yeah, for the first two
Yeah,
conferences. I
yeah,
think you're coming back
right.
again, which is going to
I
be
am looking
awesome.
forward
But
to it.
yeah, it is amazing. So make sure you mark your calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Even as you talk about what that church is like, I'm just thinking, oh man, I wish I could get more people there. And it's like, yeah, that conference is coming up. I just don't know what to call it because there's a name kind of that they had to rename it. And so Disciple Up. Yeah. So that'd be just really fun because it really is a church where miracles happen. It's one of my favorite churches to be at. And again, my wife's relatively new convert to the Catholic faith. And when she went there, she literally wanted to move there.
Well, I thought for sure we had you because you're going to have to become an American because of your wife. She was all on fire for it. So I still see hope. I think I can work on Nicole and get you here.
That's a very reasonable strategy. I can't say no to my wife. Listen, Father Declan, thanks for all you're doing, and thanks for sharing with us so humbly too your learnings and your journey because it really is a fun journey to watch. And as a leadership coach, I just find it so fun to just pull some of these principles and have this conversation with you. It's just a treat.
Yeah. No, thank you. I really appreciate being on the podcast, Ron. It was great to have the conversation again.
Terrific, terrific. And thank you guys for listening. That was a powerful conversation. It's always incredible to see how these coaching principles can transform leadership at the parish level and at the diocesan level too. That's fun because that inspires passion that makes a difference. And I hope today's podcast has inspired you. Again, if you're in the role of evangelization in your parish or even your diocese and you want to go deeper to get bigger results, head over to courses at huntleyleadership.com and check out Parish Evangelization Course for Leaders. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you for following along. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.